Good morning. We're going to see how this goes. I made it to 52 years without glasses, and I went from 0 to progressives. So I still don't know where I'm looking to make things be in focus, which is a problem when I'm reading. I don't. It's not about the light. It's about how to contort my head. I might do the. I don't know. We're experimenting. So thank you, as always, for your grace with pastoral imperfections. Our first reading is a poem. I think I linked it in one of our weekly emails several weeks ago because there's a line in it that just made me so happy. Today I'm going to read the full poem called Our Book of Delights by Ariel Hebert, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, a queer poet. It feels very appropriate to start Pride Month with this as well. And it's about a meal, which will be a common thread in the talk today. Our Book of Delights. All our windows are open, steady drizzle on the kudzu's broad backs, birds making their music like this isn't North Carolina but a tropical rainforest, and we're somewhere deep in the palms and vines. But it's our own ferns and fiddleheads, evergreens and sugar maples, trillium blooming or on the verge, for no one in particular, for everyone in particular. As if to say, go on, enjoy it. Rain, flowers, time on earth, the apple I hand-picked at the market, braiding my friend's hair, silver in my fingers, how I tie a tiny bow gently at the end just as the sun comes out. I want to believe this is true power, that kindness is the only weapon worth wielding, and I wield it, land blow after blow to my enemies without mercy. Mercy, bring the wine. Set the table for surprise guests. No matter the plates don't match and we've run out of chairs, only that there is bread and laughter, enough to go around, parades in spite of, pride in spite of. Please, someone answer all these questions I have about hummingbirds and the little futures we are reaching for, the ones rising above the horizon right before our eyes, such intoxicating visions, our truest selves with nothing to hide. Go on. Trust the child standing barefoot in the rain, her face turned up to the sky. Trust that crescendo building in your chest is your voice singing what you need to hear. The stone-heavy echo welled from darkest springs. Go ahead, open the door. No one can explain how to love the world. It doesn't happen all at once, but you can start here, right now, with yourself, someone near you. Let it go zigzagging to town to town. Look there, it's already coming back around. Then the assigned Bible reading for this morning also includes a communal meal. This one feels, something like an episode of Seinfeld or something, with people barging in one after another, followed by a walk with more interruptions. It's from Matthew chapter 9. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at a tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And Matthew got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" When he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners. Then the passage continues and with some followers of John the Baptist also barging in, asking the disciples why Jesus doesn't tell them to fast more. Again, he overhears this because he is, sitting right there. And then the story picks up here. While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader of the synagogue came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her and she will live." And Jesus got up and followed him with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak, for she had said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." Jesus turned and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, your trust has made you well." And instantly, the woman was made well. And when Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, these were professional mourners who expected whenever there was a death, he said, "Go away, this girl is not dead, but just sleeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and he took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread throughout that district. That's our Bible story. I was on a planning call earlier this week that included Rabbi Linda Holtzman. Some of you will know who she is. She's preached here at least a couple of times. She is one of Mount Airy's very visible activist clergy. Anyway, on this Zoom call, her cat, Tommy, was making himself known in the way that cats so often do when you're paying attention to your computer screen instead of to them. Like they can't even believe how backward your priorities are. I don't know how cats decide what of themselves to show on screen. I'm sure there's some complicated formula. We never saw Tommy's face, that's all I'll say. We saw a lot of his side and his tail. Tommy is a sweet cat. He's very loving. He loves attention. He loves to be pet. He loves to show some of his attributes online. Linda said that he belonged to her son and his family. They loved him. He loved them. Everything was great. And then they moved to Manhattan, into an apartment where the walls are thin and the floor is thin and the ceiling is thin, so you hear the people around you, you hear the people under you, and you hear the people over you, and you are wrapped up in the fabric of constant sound that is Manhattan. And that sweet cat became something entirely different. He was on edge all the time, grouchy, touchy, sometimes kind of vicious. Ancient people might have said it was like he had become possessed by an evil spirit. So he's back in Mount Airy now, with more room and less noise. He's Linda Holtzman's cat now, and he is the cat he used to be. He loves a lap, he loves to get pet, he loves to cuddle. He has come back to himself. Which all sounded to me like some kind of parable. A parable about being brought back to yourself. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that people being brought back to themselves is exactly what's happening in this absolutely bonkers Bible reading. I'm even going to try to make the case that this is a perfect reading for the first Sunday of Pride Month, because there's some very blatant queering of boundaries that is central to what Jesus is doing here in this story. Start at the beginning with a tax collector. That was not a major that parents hoped their child would take up at college. Remember that the Jewish people were living under Roman occupation. Matthew the tax collector was a Jewish man whose job it was, truth in advertising, to collect taxes from his people and send them to help fund the occupying force. So he would take money from his friends, his family, his neighbors, and give it to the Romans, and then his own living was not made by wages or by salary. He would collect what the Romans said he had to send in, and then he would add more on top of that to keep for himself. It's not a coincidence that the phrase tax collectors and sinners, or tax collectors and other sinners, is so common in the Gospels as an epithet. These were not people that you invited to your kid's birthday party. I don't know, I never had kids. Maybe I would have. But naturally, then, this is a guy that Jesus wants on his team. It kind of makes me think again of the ICE security guards that we see so often at our Monday vigils. Guys who need to make a living, and yet who are doing so by working for a system that harms people. Jesus calls Matthew to himself and calls him into community, which might just be another way of saying calls him to himself, because we are ourselves in community. Then we see Jesus being in community with him, taking other disciples with him and sharing a meal in what is presumably Matthew's home, where there are other, yes, tax collectors and sinners, which is when the mayhem begins. Unless I'm misreading the story, they're all still reclining at dinner when the respectable religious folks barge in. And it does say reclining, even though most of the English translations say sitting together at dinner. Many of you seen this before. Like this was the ancient Jewish way of eating, kind of reclining on their left arm where the food is, and sitting around with other people. And so you can see if everybody's lying down like this. Your bodies are sprawled out. It's a setting that is very intimate and very vulnerable. I don't know why the religious folks barged in when they did, started whispering to the disciples in the first place. But to see Jesus surrounded by disreputable folks in a setting that was both vulnerable and intimate must have really blown up their categories. In fact, their question was pretty much exactly about the categories that they wanted to sort people into. Why is he eating with tax collectors and sinners? Why is he mixing pure and impure? They saw it as a threat to holiness. But Jesus was interested less in these categories than he was in building a community of people that were being called to themselves. A second group then barges in after the Pharisees, the religious leaders, had left. But the assigned part of the reading skips them, so I'm going to skip them too, and move on to the third interruption of the meal. Another authority figure comes strolling into the house. He doesn't bother whispering to anyone. He just comes right up to Jesus, kneels down to get at face level, and says what he needs. His daughter has just died. And according to one commentator that I read, the term he uses is less generic than daughter and means something like the little apple of my eye, my heart, my life has just died. This is a loss that cuts him as deeply as someone can be cut, and in his grief, he has abandoned decorum. I think it's worth sitting with that for a moment. This was someone whose position in the community made him the picture of respectability. But here he is bursting into a tax collector's house where there is a dinner in progress that is absolutely riddled with sinners and the unrespectable. He hasn't let go of that sense of entitlement that so often comes with power. Come and lay your hand on her and she'll be fine. It's more of a demand than a request. At least that's the way it reads to me. Or an assumption that, of course, this guy is going to come with me. But there he is, having crossed a threshold, eyes red and puffy, I imagine, nose running, voice shaking. His world is shattered. And if showing his broken self in unsavory company is what it takes to start putting it back together again, then that is what love moves him to do. Jesus gets up and follows him and finds his last interruption of the story. It's in some ways the least interrupty and the most brazen. As he walks along following this broken-hearted and grieving yet respectable man, a woman reaches out and touches the fringe dangling from his cloak. It was probably higher than... It's subtle. It's even secret. Nobody had to notice. Nobody had to know. But it's just as desperate an action as the grief that moved that authority figure to go into the tax collector's home. She's been suffering for years from some kind of gynecological condition. It was a bodily sickness, but that was also a social sickness, because it kept her in a constant state of being ritually unclean, which meant that she could not participate fully in the religious life of her community. That she reaches out and touches Jesus on the part of his clothing that marks his devout prayerfulness is incredibly bold. It is a risk born of desperation. Jesus notices and speaks warmly to her, affectionately even, calls her daughter. And with words of healing, he restores her to community. After 12 years of separation, restores her with a word, calls her into community, calls her to herself. All in a day's work before raising a young girl from the dead, which is perhaps the ultimate act of calling someone to themselves and restoring them to community and confusing boundaries. What jumps out at me in this reading is how absolutely saturated it is with broken boundaries and blurred categories. A week into Pride Month, this feels to me like something worth savoring and celebrating, and maybe a scriptural story to hold on to while the voices quoting proof texts to use as weapons against God's beloved children keep getting louder. Look at all of the different people being called into community. I don't want to make too much of this. As a cis hetero man, I am wary of diluting and co-opting celebrations that aren't my own. And folks can let me know if if this is not convincing. But to me, if one of the messages of Pride Month is about reclaiming a sense of celebration and selfhood among those who have been told their identities are out of bounds, then I wonder if we can hold this story and say at least this much. That, here's my favorite line from that poem, that Jesus knew kindness was the only weapon worth wielding, and he wielded it, landed blow after blow against the categories and boundaries that made some people acceptable and some people not. Some people able to fully participate in community and some people not. You cross the threshold of a door, cross the boundary between respectable and unrespectable, between clean and unclean, which were social categories, and even messed with the categories of life and death. He called people to themselves, which meant calling them into community with people they would not naturally be in community with. Because when it comes down to it, what Jesus aimed to show is that we are all beloved, which means, I think, that the realm of God is a queer space. And this is God's good news. Amen.